Well, good evening. For those I haven't had the chance to meet, my name is John Highbush, and I have the honor of being the Executive Director of the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation. And I just want to thank all of you for coming out and joining us this evening. In honor of our men and women in uniform who protect us around the world, if you'd please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. Before we get started, there are a few people in the audience I'd like to make sure we recognize tonight. We are, of course, honored to have Vin's lovely wife, Sandra, with us tonight, as well as 5 members of the Scully family. Could we have you all stand up? It's pretty much the first row. Former Congressman Elton Gallickley and his lovely wife, Janice. Elton. Ventura County District Attorney Greg Totten. Greg. We are also pleased to have with us tonight the former owner and president of the Los Angeles Dodgers, Peter O'Malley, who is here tonight with his sister Terry. Now, you all drowned me out on that, but I want to make sure you know that he's here tonight with his sister Terry. And finally, I'd like to welcome here tonight a future owner of either the San Diego Padres or the Los Angeles Dodgers, my son, Max Highbush. Max? Okay, so normally this is the part of the introduction where we give a quick rundown of our speaker's background. Now that would take a long time, but let me stick to a few high points. Things like how at the age of 25, Vin Scully became the youngest man to broadcast a World Series game, a record that still stands today. Or how, with this being his 65th season with the Dodgers, he also holds the record for the longest tenure of any broadcaster with a single team in professional sports history. Amazing. You know, and to be sure, how many people consider Vin as a family member, a friend or a teacher who, as they grew up listening to him over the years. In fact, many immigrants credit him for helping them learn English and helping them assimilate into America. But I think everyone here knows all this because everyone here is obviously such a huge fan. I want to just take a minute to review the last 2 months here at the library when we got word that Vin accepted our invitation to speak at the library. So tickets went on sale on our website, and the phone started to ring. So we sold out immediately, but our phones continued to ring. Then you'll see a lot of my staff here tonight. The staff actually begged us to let them work this evening, yes, so they could hear from Vin and maybe, just maybe, get an up-close glimpse of the voice of the Dodgers. And then our phones continued to ring. Family and friends that we hadn't heard from in ages. You know, the ones that normally only come out of hiding when they really need something. Well, they needed something, they wanted tickets. So they called, and then our phones continued to ring. In fact, they were still ringing today with people hoping one of you had a flat tire or some other unfortunate mishap so that a ticket could be opened up at the last minute. Now, working for the Reagan Foundation, we are very fortunate and very honored to have had a wide array of speakers come through our doors. World leaders, authors, media personalities, Fortune 100 CEOs, presidents of the United States. But I promise you, none have caused the buzz and excitement of having tonight's speaker. None. Why, I could think of no better way to sum it up than how Ronald Reagan did when he stood next to Vin on the White House lawn during remarks at a ceremony launching a summer jobs youth initiative program. Then President Reagan said, "You are absolutely one of the best." Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the voice of the Dodgers, one of the best, Vin Scully.
Thank you, John. Bless you. Wow. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you. Good night. Wow, I never thought there would be such a large audience. So I will begin. Hi, everybody, and a very pleasant Wednesday evening to you. Use your imagination for a moment. You're not here. You're among 100,000 people in Red Square in Moscow. And Vladimir Putin is lecturing the large crowd on the accomplishments of his administration. And he said, "In my time as your leader, I guarantee every man and woman in Mother Russia has a washing machine and a dryer and a color television set." And way in the back, a man raised his hand. And Putin said, "What's your name?" He said, "Levine." He said, "What's your question?" He said, "I don't have a washing machine or a dryer, and I certainly don't have a color television set." 1 year later, 100,000 Russians in Red Square, and Vladimir Putin is again extolling the merits of his administration. And he said, "As I've said before, every man and woman in Russia has received a washing machine and a dryer and a color television set." And way in the back, a man raised his hand. And Putin said, "What's your name?" He said, "Goldberg." He said, "What's your question?" He said, "Where's Levine?" I have the feeling that with this vast crowd, somewhere in this room is my man Levine. I'm honored to be here. I was honored, my wife and I, to be neighbors of sorts 2 blocks away from President Reagan and Mrs. Reagan. In fact, we knew them reasonably well before he was governor, during his governorship, after, and eventually when he became president-elect. And I couldn't help but thinking, coming over here, walking through the exhibit, the home runs at Babe Ruth and Joe DiMaggio and Henry Aaron, and I kept thinking one thing. In our business of sports, we say they knock the fences down. And then I thought, President Reagan knocked the biggest fence of all down, the Berlin Wall. And it's out there for all of us to see. I was doing football for the NFL when President Reagan became president-elect for the first time. And CBS said, "We understand that you know the president-elect." And I said, "Yes, we've known him for quite a while." "Well, I wonder if you would interview him. We would use the interview at halftime on Thanksgiving Day of an NFL football game." And I said, "I'd be honored." Anyway, we did. And I realized in the course of the conversation, which was non-political, it was strictly, after all, he was a former sports announcer. In his book, American Life, he said, "I reached my goal at 22. I'm a sports announcer, and if I stopped there, I'd have been the happiest guy for the rest of my life." That was his quote. Anyway, in the course of the interview, as he would do, he said, "By the way, you know, I invented instant replay." And I thought, oh my God, another Al Gore. So I said, "Really, sir, how did that come about?" And he said, "I was a sports announcer at WHO in Des Moines, Iowa, and I was assigned to do the Drake relays." And he said, according to the script, the first race was the 60-yard dash. But the president of Drake University would come on first, and he would give a welcoming address to the vast audience, and then we would get to the race. He said, unfortunately, the president of Drake University rambled on a bit longer, and just as he was coming to the end of his speech, the 60-yard dash was run. And as soon as, I get presidents, as soon as President Reagan said to the president of Drake, "Thank you very much, sir," he then described the 60-yard dash that had already ended. But since there were only 4 racers, he knew the names, the position, and so in a sense, with all of his other tremendous accomplishments, God rest his soul, remember, he invented instant replay. No argument. When I was 8 years old, which was shortly after the discovery of fire, in grammar school, the good nuns would ask us, "What would you like to be when you grow up?" And it was normal. The boys wanted to be firemen and policemen and ball players. And the girls wanted to be ballet dancers and nurses and mommies. And this little redheaded kid wrote, "I want to be a sports announcer," which was really out in left field because, in all honesty, in those days, the only thing on radio would be college football on Saturday afternoon. But that's what intrigued me. We had a big old radio on 4 legs. It had a cross piece underneath it. I would take a pillow and a glass of milk and some saltine crackers, and I would crawl underneath the radio so that the speaker was directly over my face. And I would be listening to a game that meant absolutely nothing to me. Alabama, Mississippi. Great for a kid in Washington Heights in New York. But what intrigued me and thrilled me was the roar of the crowd. And I kept listening, and the noise would come out of the speaker like water out of a shower head. I mean, it would just wash all over me, and I'd get so excited. And then each football game, I wanted the roar of the crowd, and then I started to wish I was there. And then I eventually had the thought, I'd like to be there enjoying the crowd and be the announcer. And so that was the germ of the beginning of my desire. To this day, I guess, if I have a trademark, it would be to call the play as quickly and as accurately as I possibly can, and then shut up and listen to the roar of the crowd. And even to this day, when that crowd roars, I'm that little 8-year-old kid curled underneath the radio back in New York City listening to Alabama, Tennessee. The roar of the crowd has intrigued me, so much so that during a World Series telecast, somebody hit a home run, and as they always do, they show it again. And I thought after I had called it live, why would I have to say anything again? So they showed it, and I never said a word. And a television columnist made a rather perceptive remark. He said, perhaps Vin Scully made his greatest contribution by saying nothing. And you know, I really held that to heart. There is no way that I could say something better than that roar of the crowd. I mean, what will I say? Boy, the crowd is roaring? So I let the crowd roar, and I loved every bit of it. When I eventually got into the radio and television business, there were a couple of things that I became aware of. One, even before I got the job. The man's name was William Archibald Spooner. He was a deacon in the Anglican Church. He was known for his wiseness, and he was a wonderful speaker, except he had a problem. Every now and then, he would transpose a prefix or a suffix, and what he wanted to say didn't come out properly. And he was most famous. He was invited to give the invocation for Queen Victoria's regal dinner. And so all the dignitaries were there, and he got up at this beautiful banquet, and he had been introduced, and he gave a loving and lovely speech, and then he said, and so let's glaze our asses to the queer old dean. An embarrassed hush fell over the dining room, as you might imagine. But he recovered nicely. He said, I mean, let's glaze and raise our glasses to the dear old queen. It just didn't come out the same way. And I was very much aware of that one night in trying to describe a line drive. I said, quote, hot shot hit foul. I have never tried to use that expression again. Which also brought me up to a bit of advice I received in the dressing room many years ago in Ebbets Field. The last out of the game involved Jackie Robinson, and Jackie was called out and the Dodgers lost the game. That's okay, except Jackie thought he was safe, and he was furious. And he came into the locker room, and we had metal lockers and little steel tools, and he was throwing things. I mean, he was just furious. Now, the way the team dressed in Ebbets Field, as you walked into the door, there was definitely a pecking order. As you walked in, you saw the stars. You saw Pee Wee Reese and Duke Snider and others who were on their way to the Hall of Fame. And all the way in the back, there was a Coca-Cola icebox in those days with Cokes inside. And right by the Coca-Cola icebox was a black pitcher named Dan Bankhead. Marvelous Dan. He was the first that I remember of any player to wear the Ben Franklin half glasses. So here we all were in the locker room, and Jackie is just raising up a storm. And Dan is sitting in front of his locker at the far end with a towel across his loins and those half glasses and his hands folded across his stomach. And he said, Robinson? And Jackie stopped like that. And these are the words he said, which I've tried to hold in my heart and mind ever since. He said, Robinson, you are not only wrong, you are loud wrong. And I thought about that. How many times have we been wrong? But please, God, don't let us be loud wrong. Sometimes in this business, you can't help it. You're going to be loud wrong. Going back, even before I got into the business, there were two classical radio broadcasts. both by highly talented sports announcers. One was Bill Stern. I'm not sure how many of you remember Bill, but he had a crackling electric voice. When he said hello, it was like a bolt of lightning. It was a marvelous, marvelous voice. And he had a great talent for doing a football game. The only trouble was he wasn't quite as accurate as you might like him to be. And this particular game, Bill is coming down to the dramatic moments, and Brown breaks loose for what's going to be the winning touchdown. And Brown is to the 30, Brown is to the 25, to the 20, to the 15. The spotter is pointing to the board. It's not Brown, it's Smith. Without batting an eye, Bill said, and Brown laterals to Smith, who's at the 10, the 5, touchdown, Smith. The same year, as you probably know, especially because it was in the headlines last week, there are 3 famous horse races: the Kentucky Derby, the Preakness, and the Belmont. The Belmont, you know, California Chrome lost. The Preakness is just as big a race. And there was a marvelous announcer named Clem McCarthy. Oh, had a voice like this, but he was marvelous. And Clem did some big fights and always the big horse races. And Clem does the Preakness and calls the wrong horse the winner. Now remember, we're talking in the late 30s, early 40s, no television. Everyone is depending on this broadcast, including Las Vegas and everywhere else. And here he is calling the wrong horse. I would never do a horse race, maybe once for a lot of money, but there would have to be only 2 horses. One black and one white. Otherwise, no way. Anyway, poor Clem has the wrong horse winning the race. And he's walking down the streets of New York a couple of days later, and a cab driver hollers out to him, "Hey, Clem, how could you have called the wrong horse?" And Clem looked over and said, "Because you can't lateral a horse." There are times where I can't lateral a horse either, believe me. But that's radio. Now you get into television. Television is a whole new deal because, first of all, you're at home and you're looking at the same thing that I'm looking at, hopefully, at both ends. The Dodgers were at home in Ebbets Field, and they were losing. So how it goes. They were losing. And it's the 9th inning, and they're in the bottom of the 9th, down by 1, and they begin to rally. And the hitter now is Duke Snider, who is on his way to the Hall of Fame. But on deck is Roy Campanella, who is having an incredible day. And so Duke Snider gets into the batter's box. And the first pitch is ball 1. Crowd roars. Out of the corner of my eye, I see the first base coach, Jake Pittler. Good old Jake with white hair and a cap pulled down. And I see Jake go like that, ball 1. The next pitch is ball 2. And I look over, Jake is raising his hand high to the sky. Ball 3, crowd goes crazy, and now Jake takes his cap off, throws it in the air. Oh, I have a great idea. So I say to the assistant in the booth, tell the director to just take a huge picture of Jake Pittler, because he's really putting on a show. And I know that Duke Snider is not going to swing 3 balls and no strikes, especially with Roy Campanella on deck. And so they fill the screen of every television set in New York and of this big picture of big, lovable Jake Pittler. And I'm saying, watch his reaction. Watch his reaction. You can tell right away whether it's strike 1 or ball 4. And I'm calling people out of restrooms. I'm calling them off the streets. Come on in. I want you to watch Jake Pittler's reaction. And here comes the pitch. And it's ball 4. and he began to adjust his clothing in a most private area. I had nowhere to go. Anyway, somehow we got through the telecast. A couple of days later, I was walking through the clubhouse, and I heard Jake's voice. "Hey, Scully." I said, "Hi, Jake." He said, "What did you say about me on television?" And I said, "I don't remember, Jake. Why?" He said, "Somebody sent me a can of Johnson & Johnson baby powder." And of course, with a great face, I said, "I have no idea. Must have been a mistake." You know. So you can be loud wrong, and somehow or other you kind of slide on by. When we came out here to California, we were going to be in the Coliseum, and that was going to be difficult. First of all, we knew the fans in Southern California. They knew the superstars. They knew Stan Musial, and they knew Willie Mays and people like that, but they didn't know the rank and file players. And so we started to tell stories, or tried to, about the players. And in those days in the Coliseum, you could be sitting in the 79th row. The players were like ants down on the field. And what happened? The best break in the whole world, the transistor radio. If two broadcasters ever had favoritism to bless them in a new area, Jerry Doggett and I did, because of the transistor radio. And we had a lot of fun with the transistor radio. It was a lot of fun. Once in a while, I would actually and directly talk to the people in the ballpark. I remember one night, there was an umpire, and I was thumbing through the book trying to figure out, and I saw that one of the umpires was celebrating his birthday. And I thought, oh, wouldn't that be fun? So on the air, knowing that all these people have transistors because the feedback was terrific, I said, let's set a record tonight. Let's be the first baseball crowd in history to wish an umpire happy birthday. And the umpire's name was Frank Sikori, and I said, okay, on the count of three, 1, 2, 3, and boy, the whole stadium, I think 40,000 people, all said, happy birthday, Frank. Well, the umpire almost fainted. He was, I mean, in his career, he had never had anything like that happen. However, after I get in the car to drive home, and I'm thinking, boy, that was pretty good. But then I thought, you better be careful. Supposing, just supposing, you set it up and you said, 1, 2, 3, and you're the only one. Where would you go with that? So I learned to be pretty careful about using the transistor radio. The greatest pun that I ever committed was over the transistor radio in the Coliseum before a very, very large crowd. Joe Torre, whom of course you remember most recently managed the Dodgers, before that managed the Yankees, before that was an outstanding player, an all-star, an MVP, all of the great awards. Joe was a catcher, and the night that he caught in the Coliseum, there was a foul tip, got him on the hand, and the next night he was playing third base. And I said, in my ultimate wisdom, Joe Torre is playing third base tonight. If he never goes behind the plate again, he'll be known as Chicken Catcher Torre. Oh boy, oh boy. I brought it back because it makes me feel younger, because it was 1959 when I did it. And just to hear you groan, it was music to my ears, music to my ears. One of the things that people ask me about, you've done a lot of home runs. Are there any home runs that really stand out? And yes, there are several. but for good reason. My second year, 1951, was the most painful year in Brooklyn Dodger history, I believe, because they were playing the Giants. The winner goes to the World Series. The Dodgers were winning, and the bottom of the ninth inning, an outfielder named Bobby Thompson hit a home run. They called it the shot heard round the world, and the Giants went, and the Dodgers were empty-handed. But that home run, Bobby Thompson was absolutely glorified. And there were 1 million lunches and dinners where Bobby was honored. And they would also invite the Dodger pitcher who threw the pitch that was hit for a home run. His name is Ralph Branca. He's still with us. He's 88 years old. The thing about that home run that really made me pause, Bobby handled his role, his heroic role, very well. But even better did Ralph Branca handle his role. We all have crosses to carry of some weight and some size and some magnitude. And I always marveled at how Ralph would attend these lunches, attend these dinners, have his picture constantly taken with Bobby Thompson, and never object and never say anything, but handle his role. So that home run meant so much more to me than a home run. It was a lesson in life about how to handle things when things are not going the way you want it. I mean, it was an incredible performance, and still to this day is by Ralph Branca. So that was a big home run. Second home run probably would be Henry Aaron. I happened to be in Atlanta the night that Henry Aaron broke Babe Ruth's home run record. And as I mentioned earlier, I would call it and then shut up. So when I called Henry Aaron's home run, the place went bananas. And I didn't want to make the mistake of adding something, because you can't add to that moment. You let the crowd roar. So I took the headset off and I went to the back of the booth, and for some reason, I believe God helped me in this spot for sure, I suddenly had the thought, as I stood there watching this celebration, watching Henry round the bases, his parents at home plate, fireworks. It was an incredible moment. But I thought, wow, look at what we're seeing. In the Deep South, we're seeing a black man honored for breaking the record of a white icon. It was an incredible moment. It went way beyond a home run. I'll bet you no one will ever remember the score of that game. I certainly don't. I just remember what a moment the home run by Henry Aaron was, and will be forever. And as I happened to say, where I got the words, I don't know. God must have helped. He had to help. And I said about a black man being honored, what a great day, not just for Henry and his family and the Braves and the state of Georgia, but for the United States of America. That's probably the greatest single home run ever hit in the history of our country. Yeah. There's another home run, which would mean nothing, I don't think, to anyone but myself. In 1963, the Dodgers played the Yankees in the World Series. They won the first 2 games in New York. They came out here and they won Game 3, and now it was going to be Game 4. Now, I had the pleasure of working with a great announcer, Mel Allen, the voice of the Yankees. Unfortunately for Mel, and yes, he deserves your applause, very much so, Mel had a very sore throat. And in our business, you can understand, sore throat, you can't work. So his doctors had told him throughout the month of September, Mel, be very careful. Keep your voice down. Don't get carried away. And he did. He did a very good job. And now the World Series began, and it's amazing how people think. He was still trying to stay subdued, and the Dodgers won each of the first 3 games. And in New York, they didn't think that, well, maybe there's something wrong and Mel is being careful with his voice. They thought he's dying inside because the Yankees are losing the World Series. That'll happen. So now we each did half of the game. So let's say he would do 4.5, I'd do 4.5, and we'd alternate. And so this particular day, he was doing the second half of game 4, and I was going to be sent down to the clubhouse to cover the victorious Dodgers celebration. And Mickey Mantle came up, I think it was the 7th inning of the game, against Sandy Koufax. Big crowd, Dodger Stadium. And Mantle hit a home run. And when Mickey hit the home run, all the training, all the discipline that Mel had exercised in September went out the window. And he gave it one of his great calls, going, going, gone. And when he said gone, the nuts and bolts and strings, everything came out. He had no voice. He had no voice. Crowd died down. Now he's trying to talk. And nothing will come out. Tom Gallery was then the head of NBC Sports. I can remember it to this day. And he tapped Mel on the shoulder and he said, and he pointed to me, "Be quiet, give the microphone to young Scully." And it broke my heart because I thought, here we are on this national stage, this great announcer at this wonderful point for him and for his team, and he blows his throat. And I really and truly was hit. There but for the grace of God go I. So that's another very memorable home run, only to me. But it is a precarious high wire act when you're broadcasting and your emotions are going up and down and up and down, and people rely on you. And I felt so terrible for Mel that at that moment he had to let go of a national microphone. It's hard to forget those kind of things. And then, of course, my greatest contribution in 65 years with the Dodgers. It was 1988. We're talking about home runs. It's the 9th inning. The A's have made out. We go to commercial, and I have a thought. The old story, don't think you hurt the club. Well, I had a thought. So I asked the assistant in the booth, let me talk to the producer and director. And I know they're busy because when you're doing World Series, you have all kinds of time zones, and they're trying to figure out what's following the broadcast, what's following the telecast. And so I said, do me one favor, follow me. And they said, okay. So we came out of commercial, and there was the blimp shooting down on Dodger Stadium. Beautiful shot. And I said, if you were here with us now, the first thing you would do is take your field glasses and look in the Dodger dugout. Wham! Up came the shot of the dugout. And the camera now slowly panned the dugout. And I never said a word. And at the end of the panning, I said, Kirk Gibson is not there. Obviously, he will not play tonight. In the clubhouse, and I'm not aware of this, in the clubhouse, Gibby is sitting on a trainer's table with 2 huge bags of ice, one on each leg, and he's looking at the television set, and he's listening to me. And when I say, and so obviously Kirk Gibson will not be able to play tonight. And Kirk hollered back at the television and said, fertilizer! Or a reasonable facsimile. And he threw off the ice, and he says to the clubhouse guy, Mitch, go down and tell Tommy I'm on my way. I don't know any of this. And sure enough, Mike Davis gets on base, etc., consuming time, and out of the corner of my eye, I see Kirk Gibson. And I said what you would have said in my spot, well, look who's here. And he walks up, and as you know, he's going to pinch hit, and he's going to be a hero for all time. In my mind, I know he can't walk, never mind run. I know for a fact. And I'm thinking, and the rare time I think I've ever prayed, I never pray for a home run or anything, but I say, God, please, let him go out the right way. Don't let him strike out. Let him hit the ball hard at somebody. But please, he meant so much to us all year. Don't let him look bad in this one. Boom, home run. Home run. Dodgers win. Who got him off that training table? Who got the ice off his legs? Well, something like that. And now I'm going to tell you an inside story. I'm not even sure if Peter and Terry know about this one. This is the most important game the Los Angeles Dodgers ever played. It was the spring of 1958. The new Los Angeles Dodgers leave Vero Beach, heading for Los Angeles. They are now LA's Dodgers. And they stop off in Mesa, Arizona to play an exhibition game. As managers will do in spring training, they will change signs. You've often watched, you see the third baseman doing this or that, and it means something to the hitter. And one of the things they decided to use in this exhibition game against the Chicago Cubs was the squeeze play. Now, the squeeze play, in case you're not aware of it, is a runner at third, less than 2 out, and just as the pitcher is going to release the ball, it has to be perfectly timed. The runner breaks for home plate, and the batter, instead of swinging, bunts. And if he can get the bunt on the ground, by the time somebody picks it up, the run is home. But it's always a tight squeeze, consequently, the squeeze play. So the base runner's last name is the sign for the squeeze play. Dodgers have a leadoff man named Gino Cimoli, and Cimoli draws a walk. 1 out later, Duke Snider comes up, line drive single to right, Cimoli rounds second, and just does beat the throw from the right fielder to third, slides in a big cloud of dust. And now Gino is getting up, and he's just starting to brush. Our third base coach is named Charlie Dressen. There's a photographer for the Mesa Bugle 20 yards away from Charlie Dressen. And the photographer says, "Charlie, who is that?" And Dressen says, "Cimoli." Now, it's the first inning. It's an exhibition game in Mesa, Arizona. And the hitter is Gil Hodges, 6'3", 215 pounds of marble, who has never in his entire life been involved in a squeeze play, let alone at Mesa, Arizona, in the first inning of an exhibition game. The photographer is not that familiar with the names of the players. And he said, "Who?" And Dressen is now annoyed. He's being bothered by this man. He's got a game to go. And he hollers, "Cimoli!" That's all Gino needs. The pitcher is now on the mound. The pitcher looks in. The pitcher goes into his delivery. And here comes Cimoli. Standing at the plate is Gil Hodges, watching with bated breath and great eyesight the approach of Gino Cimoli in the first inning of an exhibition game in Mesa, Arizona. Now, several things could have happened. Number one, Hodges could have swung and hit the ball and killed Cimoli. Or Hodges could have swung and missed the ball and killed Cimoli. But Gil was so inspired by this remarkable bit of baseball artistry, a man coming home in the first inning of an exhibition game in Mesa, Arizona, He backed away and watched Somoli tagged out by 30 feet. Now you might rightfully say, what's so important about that? Well, here's why it's so important. If Hodges had killed Somoli that day, the Dodgers could not have traded Geno Somoli that winter to the St. Louis Cardinals for an outfielder named Wally Moon. Wally Moon came to Los Angeles, hit all those home runs over the screen, led the Dodgers to the 1959 World's Championship, and the rest is history. How about that game in Mesa, Arizona? I have one more, and then maybe we'll have a couple of Q&A. This one had to do in my life. It's a true story. I'm not sure how many young men are here. I know I saw Max over there, and there might be a few others. You could entitle this, Don't Be Afraid to Dream. It's a true story. When I was in high school, back in New York at Fordham Prep, a good friend of mine was the best athlete on the campus. His name is Larry Miggins. And one day in our senior year, we were sitting in the back of the auditorium and talking about what we would like to be when we eventually got out of school. And Larry said, and he was an outstanding athlete, I would love to be a major league ball player. I said, wow, that's great. I said, you know, I'd love to be a major league sports announcer. Wow. I said to Larry, I wonder what the odds are of us making that, each one of us. Whoa, staggering. And then for fun, I said, how about this one, Larry? How about you make the major leagues as a player, I make the major leagues as an announcer, and we actually do a game, same game. Yeah, wow, the odds 1,000,000 to 1. I think it was my second or third year with the Dodgers, and the St. Louis Cardinals came to New York, and in the starting lineup was an outfielder named Larry Miggins. Now, in those days, they only allowed me to do 1 or 2 innings. And allow is a very good word. They allowed me. But the way the fate had it, I was going to do the 3rd inning. And normally, you wouldn't expect where he was in the starting lineup to come up in the 3rd inning. But don't you know, Larry Miggins came up in the 3rd inning, the inning that I was broadcasting. The pitcher was a left-hand pitcher out of Arkansas named Preacher Rowe. Colorful character, marvelous, marvelous guy. And I am broadcasting, looking at this fellow with whom I sat in the back of the auditorium, talking about the chances, and we're doing it. He's at the plate, and I'm at the microphone. And as God is my judge, Larry Miggins hit a home run. It was probably the toughest home run call I've ever had because it came true. All those idle talks in the back of the, wow, it came true. So I'm not sure of the youngsters here. I don't even know how to define youngster. I mean, as Roy Campanella said, you have to have a lot of little boy in you. And I'm sure since you're here, there's a lot of little boy or girl in all of us. But that's a dream that came true. So whenever I'm talking and there are youngsters in attendance, wow, I tell that story. That goes for you too, Max. Don't be afraid to dream. Dream as high as your heart tells you to fly. Now, according to the clock on the wall, we have a couple of minutes left, John, so we might be able to do a Q&A if you would help me, and I will
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Vin. Was that terrific or not? I'm sure we have several that have questions. We have staff located throughout the aisles, both upstairs and downstairs. And all I ask for you to do is when you raise your hand, wait till we get the microphone to you, and we'll try and get as many questions as we can while we have the time. We'll start over here.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Scully, thank you
Vin.
Thank you for your time today. I wonder if you'd be so kind to tell us a story that's a non-baseball story about Chick Hearns.
You know, unfortunately, just like Bob Miller, Chick Hearn, and I, we all travel different roads. There's one picture, only one, of the three of us together, and it happened when Bob Miller was being honored for the LA Kings and everything, and Chick and I had our picture taken with Bob Miller. Otherwise, we never, ever spent any time together. Like everybody else, I admired him, amazing man. The few times I would see him briefly, it was always fun. But I don't have any Chick Hearn stories. I don't have any Bob Miller stories. Come to think of it, I'm running out of Scully stories, too.
Right over here.
Yes.
Hi, Vin.
Oh, hi.
First of all, in the preseason this year, I took an enormous sigh of relief in my car because I heard your voice.
Oh, wow. Thanks.
It's a simple question, but I gotta know who is it's very personal. I've gotta know who your favorite baseball player is of all time.
Favorite is a tough word. One of them was my mother's favorite player because he was redheaded and left-handed, but I don't think that figures. Perhaps the one for whom I've had the most respect, the most admiration. He was a remarkable human being as well as a great athlete, and I would give anything to get him into the Hall of Fame, and I'm trying. And that would be Gil Hodges, who was the first baseman of the Dodgers. We give you an idea about Gil. He was Roman Catholic, and on a Friday, in those days, Catholics would not eat meat on Friday. And the Dodgers had played a long doubleheader in Cincinnati, 100 degrees, and they had a long flight ahead of them. And they were serving steak, and he was sitting in the aisle opposite me. And the flight attendant came along and said, Mr. Hodges, and he said, oh no, he said, I won't have the steak. Can I? Oh, she said, you've worked all day long, you've got to be exhausted, you're up here, there's no other alternative, you won't be able to eat, you've got to have the steak. And it was such a simple, but it was an answer from Gil. He said, if you don't mind, I'm a little too close to the boss. So he had a little salad and that was it. But that's the kind of a human being that he truly was. A marvelous man.
Right over here.
Vinny, I think we probably all have a Vin Scully story, so I'm going to just kind of say what you've meant to me, because you kind of shaped my career in sales. Along with the announcing of the Dodgers, you could sell anything. I mean, from draft brewed Blatt's beer.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
To the time that I even went out to buy Farmer John products, and I tried to buy everything until I got to Farmer John head cheese. But you could even make that sound tasty.
Can I interrupt you for 1 second?
Surely.
On the subject? We had been out here about a year or two, and I got a letter from a man, true story. And the man said, Dear Vin, he said, for years, I go 3 blocks from my house to get an oil company's gasoline. And he said, but because of you and Jerry, I decided to switch to Union Oil. And he said, by switching, I had to drive over a mile from where I live. But he said, I drove over to the Union Oil gas station, and the attendant came over, and I said to the attendant, you know why I'm here? And the attendant said, no. And he said, because of Vin and Jerry. And in the letter, the attendant said, who's Vin and Jerry? That's one of my favorites. I'm sorry I interrupted, but
You could almost finish on that note.
no,
But,
yeah.
all right, just a quick one, and that is, of all the plays that you have seen and called, is there a specific play that, from a standpoint of exciting, was the one that just got you sort of out of the normal announcing because you just saw something special?
Well, or as it would be say up here, well. Forgive me. I have always said when asked, who's the greatest baseball player you ever saw, all around complete, and it was Willie Mays. And I tell a true story about Mays, and he agrees. You always see the World Series catch over the shoulder in center field, but that was not his greatest catch. The greatest catch he ever made, and certainly one that would fulfill the answer, was in Ebbets Field against the Dodgers. And the Dodgers have the bases loaded, 2 out, bottom of the 9th inning, trailing by 1 run. And I remember vividly, we had a young third baseman, a blonde out of Oklahoma named Bobby Morgan. And Bobby Morgan came up, and as soon as he hit the ball in the left center field gap, your mind said, double, 2 runs, Dodgers are going to win. And Mays was running as hard as he could run, which was very hard. And he suddenly dived at the ball, and suddenly his body was like an arrow. He was fully extended. He was about a foot off the ground. Now, in those days, you had 3 considerations. Number 1, the warning track was not some rubberized warning track. It was gravel. Number 2, the wall was concrete. And number 3, Mays was not wearing a helmet. He was wearing a baseball cap. So he's extended. He catches the ball maybe less than a foot off the ground. He bounces on the gravel head first into the base of the concrete wall and rolls over on his back, and his hands are on his chest. And for that split second, no one knows where the ball is. Everything froze in time. And Henry Thompson was the left fielder. And Henry walked over, bent down, took the ball out of Mays' glove, because Mays was out like a light. And he held the ball up in the air, and the umpire said out, and that was it. I must confess, I'm trying to be a good sport about it. I mean, you're applauding, and the Dodgers lost that game. Well.
Van, up here in the balcony, right up here to you.
Oh, yes.
Thank you for being here tonight, Van.
Oh, bless your heart. Thank you for being here.
Well, it's my pleasure. Our son loves baseball, and he serves in the United States Navy.
Oh, bless him.
And thank you. And when he found out we were coming tonight, he asked if we would get your autograph on a baseball. So if we could have that later tonight,
Well,
perhaps?
maybe, John, we'll see what we can do about that.
Okay.
I mean, there's probably only 1,000 or 1,500 requests here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I always remember, and it certainly happened with me, I tried very hard to play baseball in high school and in college. I went to Fordham University, which would be the equivalent of Loyola Marymount, perhaps out here. And my great moment was not anything that I did, but Fordham played Yale University, and the first baseman for Yale was George Herbert Walker Bush. And we actually played golf together and talked about that game, which Yale won 2-1. I did have a chance to say, Mr. President, as long as you're in the White House, you can say anything you want about your baseball career. He was captain of the Yale team. I said, but remember, the day that you step out of the White House, we both went 0 for 3.
Right up here in the balcony again.
First off, it's an honor, and thank you for the years of memories that you've provided all of us.
Oh, thanks. Thank you.
With the excitement of Yasiel Puig and the other Cuban players, I was just wondering if you would mind sharing your thoughts on Cuban defectors and playing in baseball.
To be honest, I really have no knowledge of what goes on. My only experience in Cuba was one spring training. It was pouring rain in Florida. And Mr. O'Malley, Walter O'Malley, Peter's dad, was afraid that because of the rains that the team would go backwards in their training. They couldn't work out. So he had the Dodgers flown to Havana, Cuba, and he had the Cincinnati Reds flown to Havana, Cuba, where the weather was terrific. And we played a series of games, and then when the weather cleared up in Florida, both teams went back and continued spring training. And what I remember vividly was Fidel Castro had just taken over. And believe it or not, when we were there, you could buy a mask with a beard, a nose, eyeglasses, a revolutionary cap, and you could have your picture taken as Fidel Castro. I mean, it was an unbelievable place. The Americans played Americans, so I didn't see Cuban games at all. That's a long-winded way to say that's my only experience. You know, I can't say to Yasiel Puig, well, how's it going, babe? It would be, no. So I really don't know. I do feel that there must be a purpose. They go from Cuba somewhere else before they can come to the United States, so they can be free agents and signed by any team. And I guess there is a temptation. When they go somewhere else, they fall amongst thieves. We know the horror stories of people being taken across the Mexican border and all kinds of terrible things happening. So, but I personally have not been able to talk to a Cuban player about it. So I'm not trying to dodge. I just don't know at all. I'm sorry.
Okay, I think we've got time for two last questions. We'll go right way in the back here.
I love you, Vinny.
Oh, bless your heart.
I wanted to ask about the 1989 All-Star game that you had Ronald Reagan, President Ronald Reagan with you. Can you share a little story?
You know, it's a painful thing because I really blew it. I was going to be honored by having Ronald Reagan sit with me and do an inning of the All-Star game. And President Reagan's office was in Beverly Hills, just off Olympic Boulevard, gigantic building, and a beautiful office. And I was asked by NBC to go and have lunch with the president, which I did in his office. And bless his heart, he had a brown piece of paper. It was like he took a paper bag and opened it up. And now here's the #1 man in the free world going to sit in a press box to do an inning, and he's already drawn a diamond on this brown piece of paper, and he's filled in all the names of all the players. And I was so touched to think that he would go to all this trouble. And I had a couple of cards with some questions and answers to prepare him. And we did the inning. And the reason I'm so touched and sorry, I should have swiped that brown paper bag. I mean, could you imagine? I would have had the President of the United States drawing a baseball figure, and I let it go. Typical Scully. Typical Scully.
Okay. Our final question right over here.
Been a statement and a question. The question I'll ask first, I want to know if you can think in history of any player that will remind you of Yasiel Puig and his exploits and the way he plays. Can you go back and tell us any other ball player that would remind you of him? In the statement, I just want to say, when I was first became aware of your broadcasting, I was a Pirate fan, and I was out here, and you were covering a game, and they were playing Clemente and Stargell. And I was listening to this broadcast, and I swear to goodness, I thought I was listening to the Pittsburgh broadcast, because you're the most fairest announcer by giving stories. You definitely are not a homer. You are so fair to the other ball teams, and your stories about the players make baseball so interesting, and that's why we appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Yasiel Puig right now is the rarest of the rare, and all you have to do is look at his numbers, and you can see that. The only other player that I had a feeling somewhat like what I have for Puig was not too many years ago, the Dodgers had an outfielder named Raul Mondesi. And the first time I saw Mondesi, I thought, oh my gosh, there's the five-tool player you always hear about. You know, run, throw, hit, catch, and hit with power. And he had it all. Unfortunately, he was not mentally ready to play the game up to the God-given ability that he had received. And that happens a lot. You take these fellas from a dirt floor, from the back of beyond, and you suddenly give them X millions of dollars. It's awfully hard. If baseball has made one major mistake, and admittedly, it was only an effort to win, but to me, the most destructive thing is the long-term contract. You give a human being 5 years guaranteed $160 million. Just how hard can he possibly work day after day? Bad day today, I'll get it next week or next year or 2 years from now. But it's counterproductive in my mind. And luckily with me, I've been going year at a time for a while.
Well, Vin, on behalf of Mrs. Reagan, our Board of Trustees, and every baseball fan that's gathered here tonight, we cannot say thank you enough.
Thank you very much. Thank you. All right, John.